Morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm glad for those who could join live and those who will catch this on replay. Definitely looking forward to giving this presentation and kind of getting things going. Been a lot happening in the financial world and many changes with the new budget bill that had been passed and moving forward. So today I'm here with you. I'm Antonio Glenn. I'm with AMG Counsel. We're a law firm that specializes in estate planning, business and corporate law, and tax advice and uh, tax controversy. I have offices here in Dallas, Texas, and I serve Texas and Maryland, and I have an office there. And so today we're going to be going over, how to protect what you build with asset protection tools. With some of this included, we'll be going over some different entities that you can use for asset protection, what asset protection looks like for yourself. And then at the end, I'll provide a link where you can meet with me for a free consultation to kind of go over and see what your asset protection needs are, or maybe just general estate planning needs. Maybe there's some other things you need to do in your business entity and structure to help protect yourself and go from there. So first and foremost, we just have a disclaimer. Of course, this, presentation is for informational purposes. I'm not giving legal advice. I am an attorney, but as we say, I am not your attorney yet. Just take this information as just, guidance, and it's just really to give you a sense of what kind of questions you should be asking an attorney or your professionals that you're meeting with, and going from there. So, why do we do asset protection? Why does it matter? Why do we need it? We need asset protection because you worked hard to build what you have. You've worked hard to get a lot of things that you set up in motion and moving forward. And what you want to do is really kind of protect what you've built, whether it's to give to your kids, if it's to protect your family during your lifetime from lawsuits, a divorce, or maybe even audits. A lot of business deals go sideways because they don't have the proper asset protection or that framework in mind. And then you can somewhat, quote unquote, lose the shirt off your back. And that's what we want to try to avoid as much as possible moving forward. So business owners and professionals are really targeted in this area because one, you're holding yourself out as a business professional, probably an affluent person in an affluent neighborhood with affluent clients. And so there's a lot of risk for professional liability exposure, especially if you're a medical doctor or you have different practices. Maybe you're a real estate investor and people see, oh, you have a lot of real estate property and things like that. As an attorney, to knowing other attorneys want to go after the money. They want to go after the deep pockets. So this is why attorneys will sue your company, the other company, and you personally, because they want to try to figure out who has the most cash available, who has the most money available to go after in this situation and to do this. And so one of the things we want to try to avoid is that people don't want to be aware of, what debts do you have? How do you conduct yourself in managing your business and how to do this? And we'll go over some of the entities and structures, but I'll also too go over some of uh the mechanics of how you operate, right? Signing documentation, like here, your business debt or contractual risk. Some of those, even if you have the proper structure or entity in place, you can still kind of negate that if you're not really paying attention or aware on how you sign documents or what you are signing in those contractual agreements. And we want to work through those as well. Some common myths, really is most people think, oh, I have insurance, so I'm covered and I don't have to, really think about asset protection, but that isn't always the case. Insurance is good because the insurance company is good to help you fight or defend your position if you are getting sued. Most of the time when it's a malpractice suit, that is negligence. And you do have malpractice insurance, but your entity, for the most part, doesn't really offer you that type of protection that you would normally have from a creditor or from a business partner or something with your entity, your LLC, you do need insurance for that malpractice because that's a negligence. So if a patient sues a doctor, their PLLC isn't the right structure to offer them the protection that they're looking for. So insurance would cover that, but it doesn't cover everything. And that's another thing we'll look at. Again, here we talked about the LLC protecting you. Again, that may not be the case, and we'll take a look at that and see what that looks like. And then most people think, well, I'm not rich enough, right? But they don't, they're the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney, they're not really thinking about that. They want to think, hey, this person is a doctor, they're gonna have money, they're gonna have assets that we can go after on top of insurance, and they'll be looking to kind of come after those things. So, what is the goal of asset protection, right? What are we trying to accomplish here? And, why are you reaching out to an attorney and, to others in order to try to fortify yourself? And so, one of the biggest golden rules is, asset protection is really an advanced strategy, right? So, you want to plan ahead of time because if you wait until you get sued, then it's really kind of late to implement some of these structures and techniques in order to protect you. You're not hard to reach. You want to make it difficult to seize any money you have. If you have $100,000, in your personal bank account, that's open and subject to a lawsuit, to litigation, to garnishment. If the IRS says, hey, I think you owe us money based on this, and we're going to reach in and take that, now that money is exposed, and we want to try to cover and protect that as much as possible and do it in a way that is legal. This is a legal structure set up to preserve your wealth and make sure that you're not, losing your shirt off your back from anything. So here again, limit exposure. You want to, maintain, access while shielding the legal ownership. You want to discourage lawsuits, and we'll go into, how do we do that through privacy more so than asset protection, which is kind of you piggyback one on the other, and we'll talk about that as well. But you also want to kind of make sure that you have some control over this structure and technique, and you are the one who are advancing the goal. So instead of being reactive, you're able to be proactive, and it helps serve you and your family because really they're the ones who are quote unquote are going to pay out of this, or your partners in that situation, and we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So we have a good group on today. We have a small group on today. I know some people, it's a Saturday. It's still a lot of soccer and club sports. But if you have a question for those who are live, please jump in and chime in whenever. So some of the foundations that we'll go over, if and I'm starting this conversation a little bit where I'm going to try to work my way up to some of the bigger high level concepts, but some of the basic points are, of course, trust, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, insurance, and exemption planning is a big key piece for asset protection, especially if you live in states like Texas. And then Maryland does have some exemptions as well. And so those are a big part. So your very estate too could have some good exemptions for you. And an exemption is, hey, this is exempt from, creditors or exempt from a lawsuit. So it's protected in that way. Then you have, structures your client risk profile and what state you're in. That is huge too. Different states offer different protections based on the type of entity you set up or trust or LLC. And you'll see that later in some of my slides. We'll go over some commonly used states and jurisdictions because they want protection, right? So a lot of big Fortune 500 companies have their main corporation or situs of their company in Delaware, right? They have it in Delaware. Delaware is a jurisdiction known to be able to protect these bigger companies. And then that company, then they can afford to have foreign jurisdictions or other LLCs in different states that protect them in the individual states. But the Delaware court is where they want to be. The Delaware jurisdiction is where they want to be. And that provides them a lot of knowledge and understanding of what lawsuits can come to them and what judges are going to be more favorable to them. Because one thing about jurisdiction is if you got into a lawsuit, you want to be able to know the judge. You want an attorney who knows the judge and his tendencies and how that courtroom operates, what their precedence is like, and what other case laws out there available to you if you have to go to litigation. We'll talk about a layered approach of protection, which works. A lot of my clients now, they have LLCs and then they also have a trust. And so you're using a combination of different estate planning and statutory entities in order to help you compartmentalize what your assets are from personal business. So that's the first kind of way you want to separate them, and you kind of want that barrier, and we'll talk about that too. And then a little bit, we talked about homesteads and exemptions, because a homestead exemption, especially here in Texas, is a huge exemption. And then that homestead exemption is on your home. So whether your home is worth, 100,000 or 2 million, basically that house that you're living in is taken off the table from creditors. The only thing that can really take that home is if you have a tax lien against it. And that's a really, really good asset protection tool for someone. So what we'll talk about here is a little bit of inside outside liability. So we're getting started. So inside is you have a risk from business, a slip and fall on a rental property. I have a client, they have a rental property or a commercial property, and if someone slips and falls and that property is in my name as Antonio Glenn, excuse me, then guess what? When they sue, they're suing me. So not only is the commercial property at risk, outside of my home because of homestead exemption, but then my car, the money I have in my bank account, any other assets that I have, that is now open to risk from this one creditor, when really there should be separation there, right? I shouldn't have to personally pay for something that happens on the business side. And this is where you get the LLC, limited liability company, to help you shield in that area. Now, on the flip side, you reverse that, right? I have a limited liability company. I'm making a lot of money. Tons of money are coming in. Everything is going well. And then there's a car accident. I'm in a car accident. This happens. Now they want to sue me personally. And now they see my business account and they want to go after all of my business account. They want to go after that and try to take my business or get some. When I get a distribution or when I take money from my business, they want to be able to come in and take that or get ownership. Like sometimes you'll hear people be like, yeah, I'm gonna sue you and then I'll own your business. That's what they're referring to. So what we'll have is that, we'll use these entities, LLCs, trusts, or exemptions to kind of separate those and box those out again, as we're trying to compartmentalize where is the liability coming from and where are the assets. And we want to shield those. And what we have to do is make sure that we're doing that properly. So the first thing we'll do is talk a little bit about the exemption planning. This is a little bit more simple because the exemptions are mostly already in place for you. You don't have to really go out and actively do anything to do this. For in Texas and Maryland, you do have to file a homestead exemption application, right? So you do that once you buy the house, you fill in the application, you take it to the office and they put it on file for you. This helps exempt you from tax liability on the property tax side, which is the state side. And then you also too have your homestead protection on. If someone sues you, you have your house. They're like, hey, I want your house. You owe me that. Your house is off limits. Hey, I live here. Now, if you have a rental property or a second home or a vacation home, that home may not be under homestead exemption, right? It's a second property. So that home may be vulnerable to attack by creditors. And so this exemption may not work for that. You may have to do something else in the planning process. But for an exemption standpoint, this is what it's in. So a lot of people, if they file for bankruptcy or something like that, consumer protection, these exemptions are in place for them. Or even the bankruptcy court won't say, hey, you have to sell, your primary home or residence in order to pay this tax liability. That could be off the books because now you have this homestead exemption that you have set up. All right, so now we'll get into what's an LLC. And a limited liability company, I think most of us on the call know what this is. We'll go through it, really quickly, but there are some key aspects of this limited liability company that I think people need to know about, right? So you have an LLC, you set it up, but there are formalities that go along with this. And I get a lot of clients that don't stick to their, to their entity formalities, and it's going to expose you to being able to, get what we call piercing the corporate veil. So when someone does sue your LLC, if it's not set up properly, now they can come after you. And this is one of the things that can somewhat break your asset protection in this situation. One of the big key pieces is if you're a single member LLC, which means you're the only owner of that, you are more vulnerable to getting the corporate veil pierced because the way the LLC is set up is it's really there to protect the other partners of the business, right? It's there to shield them. It's there to shield you too. But if you're a single member LLC, you need to be a little bit, you need to be more stringent and more rigorous about your compliance with it. So have a yearly board meeting, keep minutes when you're making, key decisions for your business. Don't commingle funds is the first and foremost. If you're going to your LLC's business bank account and just grabbing money out whenever you want, you can do that as an owner's draw, but it'll kind of show, hey, this was not set up. That he or she was not on payroll. They weren't paying themselves money. They were just using it as a bank account. And it was what we call an alter ego, which is a term of art that just says this LLC is really just in place for you. Like you're just kind of using it as your personal bank account, and then the creditor can come in. The other thing that I see a lot of business owners do is they continue to sign documents in their personal name, or they continue to do personal guarantees on the contract or the loan, thinking my LLC is going to protect me. Your LLC can protect you, but if you sign the documents as Antonio Glenn, just that, they're going to, now I'll be bound by that personally, and my business will be bound. The goal for you as a business owner is really to get business credit that'll allow you to only have to use the credit and leverage the business in order to do your operations. So if you see personal guarantee language in there, call me. Say, hey, look, can you look this over really quick? They want me to personally guarantee on this. I want to fight or push back on that. What can I do? Then when you sign it with your title. The title bar is there for a reason. You put in managing member or CEO, whatever you want your title to be. This shows and designates to them, to that party, to the court that, hey, I signed this in my business capacity. I didn't sign it in my individual capacity. I signed it in my business capacity. And that's a huge thing because it does make a huge difference. I mean, I don't do a lot of litigation, but I do enough or I'm around it enough that these small things will allow them to pierce the corporate veil and go after you personally. So please, think about that. So the LLC, you combine this with partnerships or corporations, you can have members, you can have a multi-member LLC, which offers more protection, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then you use this for operating businesses, you can do it for asset, separation. You can use it, if you have a practice, me as an attorney, I have a professional limited liability company. If you're a doctor, then you'll have a professional limited liability company for your medical practice. And here in Texas, one of the strategies of having a trust own the LLC, which we'll talk about later, is in certain instances, your trust can still be a member of a PLLC, but that trust only needs to have that doctor who's licensed to practice to be the trustee or beneficiary of that trust. And so that doctor, for asset protection purposes, may just need to have a trust just for themselves. So, so if it's Dr. Dre, then Dr. Dre has a trust set up for him that holds membership interest into this PLLC. And then his wife will have a separate trust that is more of a revocable trust for her and the kids and the family and everything else. And that's kind of how you can have some separation there. So that's what a limited liability company is. If anybody has any questions on that, please put it in the chat or come off and quit. We have a small crowd, so we can go through some questions. So what people oftentimes use the word holding companies or a holding company. A holding company is just a fancy word for an LLC. It's just they don't use it for operations, right? Most of the time, a limited liability company, you're running the business, you're running the practice. I'm doing real estate, I'm doing consulting, I'm doing law, whatever it is, what your services are or your product is, you're setting it up as a limited liability company. But some people have what we call as a holding company. So this LLC is really isolated. You're really having it as a top layer to there's no operations because if I have an employee who's operating out of this entity and they get sued, now the holding company can get sued. But if I have a holding company that's really just there to take the money, there's no operations going on, the liability that this holding company is going to get pulled into litigation or into a lawsuit is very minimal because it's not conducting any activity. It's just holding money. It's just holding assets. And that's what the holding company is. So when you hear holding company, just think another LLC that just holds money or it doesn't do a lot of operations. So I hope that's clear. Again, you would have to keep up with those formalities and everything that you do, and that's a part of it. So here you can see on the slides what I have is a series LLCs in Texas. And so let me go to that slide because I pulled it out. So a series LLC in Texas for asset protection, right? So if you're into real rental properties and real estate, the series LLC is a really, really nice function because most times an attorney is going to recommend to you if you're doing rental properties or if you have multiple businesses, you should have for each business or each line of business, you should have a separate limited liability company for that. So, you know, they went to Texas and to some other states, and now you have this series LLC, which allows one main LLC to get started, one what we call the parent LLC. And then underneath that, you can have these what we call baby LLCs or mini LLCs or sub LLCs that go under that main one. So that main LLC or the parent one is kind of a parent company. It's a holding company. It's there to let all that money flow up to that one entity. And then you have these sub entities layered underneath that you can operate your business. The good thing is you only have to pay the $300 one time. Here in Texas, it's expensive to set up an LLC. It's $300. In California, it's inexpensive, but California has a LLC franchise tax of $800 a year per LLC. So let's say you have five rental properties in California and you have an LLC for each of them. Now your margins are coming down because you're going to have to spend about what's that, 4,000 a year just to keep those LLCs operational. And that's definitely going to eat into your margins. And that's going to make it like not as much fun or pleasurable because you're kicking out so much money just to have that operation. So here in Texas, you can have a series LLC. You can have one LLC and you have these underneath and you can manage it. Again, there's internal liability protection between each sub-series. It reduces the filing fees and paperwork, what we just discussed, and you can structure it. Each sub-series can actually also have different people with membership interests, different owners, different people who are different managers. So what we do is we set up one big operating agreement for the parent LLC, and then we do a little baby operating agreement for the smaller ones, and it helps reduce fees, expenses, and it gives you that asset protection that you're looking for and in a good structure that you can be set up for. So that's a good technique here, especially in Texas, or if you're in a state that has a series LLC component to it, you should definitely look into doing that, and it keeps down. So the other thing is you don't have to do as many tax returns, right? You don't have to do a tax return for every sub, right? It can all go on one tax return. And as long as the books are separate, like you have a separate QuickBook account for each one, you can go from there and does it. The only downside to a series LLC is that it's new. It's new. Every bank or every institution isn't so comfortable or have a legal staff that can comprehend what you have in your documents. So if you go with one of your subseries and says, hey, I want to open up a bank account, or hey, I want to open up an investment brokerage account with this subseries, they might be like, I'm not quite understanding what you have. I'm just used to an LLC and an EIN number. And so those are a little bit some of the drawbacks there. But if it's for rental property or some other things, it's definitely worth, investigating and giving me a call. All right. So one of the big things too, if you don't know, you will hear is, should I set up a Wyoming LLC? So if you're on YouTube or TikTok and the guy's like, set up a Wyoming LLC, is going to get you right. And, you can't be sued and all of these things. the Wyoming LLC isn't a it's not a total asset protector, right? And it is an LLC, it does give you that. But what you need to know is that the good thing is it's privacy, right? So one thing about litigation or someone suing you is they need to know who you are. They need to know who the party is to sue, where you are, where do you live, what's your address. One thing about litigation, you need to be served, right? That's a formal part of the litigation process. So in Wyoming, you don't have to publicly list who the owners are of that business. You don't need to include that. So if you have what's called a resident agent, the person who lives in Wyoming who's going to accept your mail, their name will be on file. You can have myself or some other like business entity startup company set it up for you. You get it going and set up, and now your name isn't attached to it, right? So you have this Wyoming LLC there, and they have charging order protection, which is really, really good. And we'll go over charging order protection in a little bit because a lot of people aren't familiar with that term. No state income tax in Wyoming. Okay, great, but you don't live there, so it may not be the best for you, but that is a benefit for someone who's there. You have these minimum fees, and then you have great statutory protection against that piercing the corporate veil and how to go through that. And then is it ideal for parent companies that where this would be your holding company or your parent company, and then you would have a foreign jurisdiction LLC in your home state, namely Texas or Maryland for my states. And so that's one of the things you would have. So when you hear Wyoming LLC, that's what they're doing it for. They're doing it for anonymity purposes, where they don't know who you are, you don't know who they are, and you can manage this from Wyoming and you can set it up and still operate your LLC in your home state. The other thing too about anonymity is trusts are anonymous too, because trust, most people think, oh, do I take my trust to the recording office or to the register of wills office? No, you don't do that. A trust is a private document, and a will is a public document. A trust is a private document. I hope I said that right. So your trust, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays internal. So if you have a Wyoming LLC that your name isn't on, no one can attach it to you. You have a trust, and the trust, you can name your trust whatever you want. So it doesn't need to have your name. So I can name my trust, USA Real Properties Trust, right? Then people think, oh man, this is a huge conglomerate. I'm not going to sue them because your name is intimidating. But if they see, oh, Joe Schmo, then they're thinking, oh yeah, we can push Joe Schmo over. He's going to settle. He's going to get a court date going and go from there. And we can kind of help avoid all of that. So that's a good part of that. Any questions thus far? We're about halfway through. All right, I'll take that as a no. All right, so here's a little breakdown of what we would see, right? I think one thing what happens a lot, and uh, with my chagrin, is that I will get a client that comes to me and says, I did listen and I did set up a Wyoming company, but they don't set up an LLC in their home state. So if you have a Wyoming company, or if you did Delaware, right? They told me to do Delaware. If you did Delaware, or Vegas, oh, I'm sorry, Nevada, because anonymity. If you did that there, but you didn't have an LLC in your home state, you don't have asset protection. If I'm here in Texas and I get sued in Texas and I don't have a Texas LLC, then I'm going to get sued. I can't go to Wyoming and say, hey, look, I have a Wyoming LLC. That should protect me. That's not going to work. And I think people miss that step. So here you definitely need to have that step of, I have an LLC in that state, but I also have what we call a foreign jurisdiction LLC in the state that my feet are in. Wherever your feet are, you should almost always have an LLC there to protect you on your home state. So again, here's the benefits of the Wyoming LLC, privacy, where you don't have to disclose that information. You have charging order protection, even if you're a single member LLC, and we'll go into why you need that a little bit more. There are stronger statutes and fees, and you can have this as your holding company and set it up that way. It adds on. Everyone doesn't need this. I, talk to clients, oh, anonymity. I'm like, are you really, what kind of business are you in? if you're just selling jewelry and things online or something like that, you don't need, all these. Now, if you want to pay and do it and move forward with it, I'm totally fine with that. I'm happy to advise you and help you scale your business. But in all fairness, I want to be fair to you. And the other thing is compliance, right? I have a lot of clients who, yeah, my business is active, but their business has been inactive for years because they don't know how to go to Wyoming and update their documents, right? A part of asset protection is, dotting the I's and crossing the T's because you need to be in compliance with this, or else your LLC will go inactive, and guess what? You're exposed, right? That's, unfortunately, that's when the lawsuit would happen, when that gap of you being inactive in your business, and that's what you want to try to avoid. So here in Texas, again, you'll have your local presence and your local operations, a PLLC if it's a medical practice or an attorney firm. Then you have some charging order protection, but it's a little bit more limited, right? So this one is for a multi-member LLC. We're a single member LLC. You have to be a little bit more on point on how you're operating. Okay, so what's a charging order, right? I don't think a lot of people know what a charging order is and how it works. So if you have a limited liability company and you get sued, and let's say that creditor is successful in that lawsuit, then the court says, hey, now you have a right to take some of the money, right? So let's picture all of us. How many of us is on the call? Like 5, 6 of us. Okay, we're all multi-members of this LLC, right? And so the court says, okay, creditor, you have a judgment against Mr. Glenn, but we don't want you taking money from these other members. They weren't a part of the lawsuit. They're not getting sued. So the charging order says, and the remedy for the creditor is if Mr. Glenn takes a distribution or takes money from that LLC, you as the creditor now can take that money. Now you can take that money, right? So now you have a lien on that distribution. So this is really an exclusive remedy for in Texas, and it's really good for multi-member LLCs. So if you have a single member LLC in Texas, you may want to add another member on, right? You may want to add a spouse if you can. You may want to add a trust on as you can to kind of layer it and get this charging order protection that you're looking for here in Texas on that. Maryland allows foreclosures where you can do a foreclosure on a portion of it and get equitable remedy, so you're a little bit more exposed. And then, of course, adding a member like that Wyoming company as a member of your LLC kind of offers you that protection as well, because then you have a multi-member LLC and the charging order can only be remedied when you take a distribution. So, okay, I'm not going to take a distribution at the end of the year of the 100,000, right? Because guess what? The creditor is going to come and take that. I'm not trying to tell you to avoid paying your creditors, but if you have mouths to feed and you need that money, okay, I'm not going to take a distribution. What am I going to do? I'm going to take a salary for 100,000 out of that LLC, and then that salary can pay me what I need to pay my bills and pay my expenses. And then I can pay my creditor from that. I can pay my creditor from this. And so based on your state rules, speak with an advisor, make sure you're doing this properly. But yeah, you can take a salary because maybe they don't have access to that and you can legally do that. So take a look at that. That's kind of another option for you if you're caught up in that situation. But again, there are things you have to kind of do before you're in litigation or you've been sued in order to make sure it's not a fraudulent transaction. So please keep that in mind on what some of your options are and go from there, because I don't want you to do a fraudulent conveyance and that'll come back to bite you. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what is piercing the corporate veil, right? And piercing the corporate veil is, I don't think a lot of people hear this term outside of law school, but it's basically a legal doctrine where the court says, even though you have a limited liability company or a corporation, we're going to pierce that. We're going to punch through that, and we're going to allow this person to sue you personally. The whole reason for the statutory limited liability company is to offer that limited liability so you won't lose the shirt off your back. And in some instances, the court will allow this. Most of the time, it's because of fraudulent transactions. But it allows, hold the owners personally responsible for business debts, which they normally won't do, and it breaks down that wall between personal and business. So that's what you don't want to have happen. But piercing the corporate veil does happen from time to time. Here are some of the common grounds for it: commingling funds and assets. I talk to some clients when they're new, they're young. I'm like, okay, what are you doing for your, like, what's your bank account? And they're like, oh, I just got my one same bank account in my name, Mr. Glenn, but it should be AMG Counsel. So they have this one account and they're just paying the business and their personal, boom, they can go in. Another thing is undercapitalization. What this means is that you don't have enough capital in your business to really be running, right? Basically, you're just running a shell corporation. You're just saying, hey, I have this LLC, it's supposed to protect me, but you really don't have enough money in here to fund anything, to operate anything. You keep draining it out to zero. Now, and again, this alone probably won't pierce the corporate veil because you can be like, hey, I'm just not that good with money, or my expenses are high. It's my first 3 years in business. We don't have a lot of cash flow and everything like that. But undercapitalization can be one. And you'll see this from time to time, especially with the IRS. The IRS will come and say, hey, your business is undercapitalized. You're not making any money. You have a hobby now. You can't keep deducting these as business expenses on your Schedule C because you're not making any money. You're running at a negative loss year after year. That's not right. You're not, the purpose of the LLC is to make money, not to keep running deficits year after year. So you'll be undercapitalized. So you'll lose your tax deductions, and then this will open you up to piercing a corporate veil. Again, failure to observe formalities. You're not keeping records. You don't have an operating agreement. An operating agreement for an LLC is a vital, vital key piece of what you want to have in place. And then if you're just committing fraud or doing other things, if you're just like, getting business credit cards through the LLC and then not paying them and doing fraudulent transactions and other things like that, then the court might say, hey, look, you were using this as an alter ego. That won't work. We're going to pierce the corporate veil and go from there. Okay. So this slide a little bit just talks a little bit about some business structures. We talked about Series LLC. One thing I didn't bring up is the LLC versus the corporation, right? And so I was using LLC as my kind of de facto entity for most people because it is easier to set up. It is easier to have a single member limited liability company, and then a corporation. Most people think as a corporation, you need to have some huge, company. Most corporations are huge because they want to go public, but corporations are really, 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 really good for asset protection because you are entirely separated from the corporation. You have the corporation, which files their tax return, which is an 1120. Then you have yourself as the employee or officer or director of that corporation. And then you're probably getting paid a salary from that corporation. So most of the time you do need to have, I would say, maybe 200, 250, 300,000 and, net net income or revenue in order to kind of would avoid double taxation or help minimize double taxation in that situation, because a corporation does have double taxation, but it is really good for asset protection because you are totally separated from the corporation, even on the IRS side. So if the IRS comes and slaps some type of judgment or lien against the corporation, you personally on your 1040 are not affected by that as an officer. And what you would have is your internal documents. Instead of having an operating agreement, which is for an LLC, you would have bylaws for your corporation, right? And the bylaws spell out, who's going to be, conducted, who's protected. Most bylaws already automatically put in if you're, on the board or an officer working on behalf of the corporation, that you are protected in that situation. And you're not personally liable for anything unless it's gross negligence, which means, of course, some kind of harassment case, or you hit somebody at work or something like that, then yeah, you'll be personally liable. But if it's for business operations, for the most part, you'll be covered even from suits. And most of the time, a suit in a corporation comes from members, shareholders who sue the board or sue officers because things aren't moving correct for the corporation. And so keep a corporation in mind. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. We can go in more detail about it and go from there. But a corporation is a good structure to have. But most of the time, like most doctors do start to flip to become a corporation. If you have like a trucking business that is on the road a lot and is doing a lot of traveling, you want to have a corporation. And because of the tax breaks, the Tax Jobs and Cut Act, it was supposed to die out, but now with the BBB, the new bill that's been put in and submitted, some of those tax breaks will continue on. They won't be sunsetted, and you'll be able to keep that corporate tax rate at 21%, and you can use that to your advantage. Okay, so what is a trust? So now we'll get into what is a trust. So a trust is, as you can see here, it's a legal relationship where the trustee holds title to property for the beneficiaries, and there are all different kinds of trusts. Most trusts are going to be in this bucket, though. They're either going to be revocable, which means they're flexible and you can change them, but you can see here there's no creditor protection because the trust still is somewhat attached to you, the individual. And then you have an irrevocable trust, which does offer much, much stronger asset protection for yourself, even in a Medicaid case, right? So even Medicaid, so when a person applies for Medicaid, they get a Medicaid asset protection trust. They put their assets into this trust, and then Medicaid comes and looks 5 years later and says, hey, you don't have any assets. It's all in this Medicaid asset protection trust where I still get to benefit from the money that I've earned and saved during my lifetime. I don't have to spend this money down in order to qualify for Medicaid, right? So if anyone on the call doesn't know, if you want to get Medicaid, you can only have about $3,000 in your bank account. So let's say you worked hard, you have this empire, you have all this money, you have houses and everything, and you want to leave a legacy to your kids. Basically, Medicaid would say you have to spend all of that down to about $3,000 if you want Medicaid in order to provide you with long-term care. And again, if you have all that, you know, maybe yeah, spend your money, say let Medicaid go to someone who does really, really need it. It's an argument can be made, but that's a policy one. But the Medicaid asset protection trust is there because again, you do want the money to live off of, and you don't want to have to spend it all, but there's some protection there. So in this case, though, irrevocable trust could be set up to offer protection for your family, right? So you have this SLAP, which would be it's a special kind of trust that you can put money in for your spouse and your kids. It's called spousal lifetime asset trust, where this money can go to the spouse. Your spouse can use it. It's for the kids, but it is irrevocable, so it's tough. So some clients are like, I'm not so comfortable doing that just yet. Maybe in different situations, but it allows you to kind of compartmentalize some of your assets and funding to your spouse. A lot of athletes kind of do this too. You'll see that they may get sued or maybe they go through a divorce and the ex-spouse now thinks, oh, I should be entitled to this. He signed this contract for, X amount of dollars and money and everything like this. But when they go to discovery and the attorneys go in the divorce proceedings, guess what? That all of those assets and funds are no longer in that athlete's name. They're in their mom's name or they're in this, trust name or somewhere else, that is separated from them personally. And now they don't even have access to that during divorce. So those are some things too. So one thing about a trust, you'll know, let me tell you, I should have did a slide on this, is that there are three parties to the trust. So the number one party to the trust will be you, the grantor, the person who sets up the trust. That's who initiates the trust. Then you have the second person who is the trustee. The trustee is the person who is kind of the handler of the trust, right? The trust is just an entity, it can't do anything. So when you give or gift, you give to the trustee to manage on behalf of that trust. The trustee has a fiduciary duty, which means they're legally obligated to abide by the instructions in the trust. So If the trust says to give to my kids when they turn 25, that's what the trustee is supposed to do. If it says, hey, don't give to Mr. Glenn because he's gotten enough, then the trustee should abide by those rules as well. So you have the grantor, the trustee, and then the beneficiary, right? So many kind of couples, when you set up a revocable living trust, you will have a grantor, you'll be the trustee, and you will be the beneficiary. And then your kids will be your contingent beneficiary, which means if something happens to you and your spouse, then your kids can step in and then they would be the beneficiaries of those money and funds for you. Okay. So when you have trust, some states also have what's called a domestic asset protection trust. And this is why I brought trust up. We use trust too in asset protection as well. But again, as you can remember, a revocable trust doesn't offer that asset protection. So sometimes I get clients that come and say, hey, I want to do my estate plan. I want to set up a trust and have asset protection. TikTok, I was listening and they told me to do this and I have to sit them down and, just set expectations on. I don't want to, I'm not going to tell you something that's not legally accurate, but there are things to do to protect your assets and to set up your estate plan. But a revocable trust, most of the time, is not one of them. So here you have what's called a domestic asset protection trust. Unfortunately, in Texas, they don't allow for this type of trust, so I don't use it, pretty much at all. I just kind of refer to it because I'm sure people hear of it or have heard of it. Maryland also doesn't do DAPTs for in-state residents, so but there are other options. But what this trust is, it's really nice, actually. It's just kind of a irrevocable trust where the grantor is also the beneficiary. So the grantor can still benefit and have this asset protection on this trust that they set up for themselves. And it's really, really nice. So some options for us in this is again that SLAT, that spousal lifetime access trust. For indirect benefit, you have some hybrids that you can have where you have a third party trust with the power to add a grantor as a beneficiary. So there are a few things you can do here. But most of the time we would either use an LLC or some other type of asset protection remedy in order to handle asset protection here in Texas and in Maryland. Okay, so I'll touch on this really quickly. So again, Delaware is a big, big state, right? And Delaware has a lot of rules in regard to limited liability company protection. They also have what we call a Delaware trust for that, where you can kind of set it up and try to use some of your Delaware choice of law to rule or govern your trust. And most trusts, you can have a different choice of law that helps govern your trust and what you use it for. So I wanted to put this slide in. We won't talk about it a lot because a lot of people don't use it that often, but I did want to include it just as a reference point for those who hear these type of trusts. Sometimes they're, I guess misnomers, they're misnamed for something else, and then go from there. But what we will do is we'll go into a quick case study. And this will be a little bit about, Dr. Smith. He's in Texas. He has his own clinic with partners. He has rental properties with his spouse. He has a brokerage account. So basically, he's at risk at malpractice, divorce, IRS audit. Let's say a tenant slips and falls at one of the rental properties or his practice, and an employee lawsuit. He has a PLLC for his practice. Uh, we would put the rental properties into multi-member LLC if possible. And then we have that SLAT or hybrid for his investments and then a prenup. Also too, umbrella policy. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with umbrella policy, but if you have insurance, so let's say you have car insurance, auto insurance, or some other insurance, maybe renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance for your rental property, and you have the slip and fall accident happen there, that insurance has a limit on it. And if they are able to get a judgment or win over that insurance limited amount, let's say it's $1 million on the insurance policy, and they get a judgment for 2 million, guess what? There's a shortfall of $1 million. So this umbrella policy is attached to you personally that says, hey, if my homeowner's insurance doesn't make up the difference between what's on the face value and what's on the judgment, my umbrella policy will pay that $1 million on my behalf, right? So now I have some extra coverage on me to cover when there's a shortfall for these other insurances that I have out here. And so, again, you get into a fight at a bar, not that we go to the bar or be into a fight or whatever, but let's say you're out and something happens. You hit someone, right? An altercation happens, you get sued. You don't really have any insurance to cover you for that type of encounter, right? So now your umbrella policy would step in and say, hey, we can cover this, judgment against you in this civil case because you don't have any other insurance, your homeowner's insurance, auto insurance, all these insurances are not going to come. You have this umbrella policy that kicks in for you to help stave off that type of lawsuit or loss. So look at an umbrella policy, talk to your your insurance agent, and just bring it up and ask questions about it. I think it's a really good thing to have. It's really, really affordable. I think it comes out to about maybe like $5 a month for additional coverage in those situations. And, you know, uh, we're in America. That's the way people used to get rich, was to sue someone. So be wary about that. So anyway, so how much time? So we have about 2 minutes left. Okay, so here's some insights of high risk professional planning. Using multiple LLCs to divide the low risk assets from high risk assets. Again, having a holding company that absorbs those multiple streams of income, whether it's from your practice or your rental properties, and then you have some insurance that goes there, and then you have trust to help you offset and set some generational wealth planning for yourself. And so we'll go into really on what it looks like in using combining um, combining the LLCs and trusts effectively. And I use this a lot for my clients. Or the LLCs, you use that limited liability um, protection for, especially for a rental property or a business or something like that, because that's the operational part of what you're doing. So that LLC somewhat controls that. Then you have a trust that can give and take income. And then this trust will own this LLC, and we'll go into that. So most of the time, I'll have them set the trust up first. We'll get the trust set up, we'll have it established. Then that trust, and the trust can have any name it wants because you want some anonymity there. It can either own that Wyoming company, and then you have extra layer of anonymity and protection. And then that Wyoming company is the member of that LLC here in Texas. So now when someone goes to search and they try to find who owns this, they would have to do a lot of due diligence to kind of find you, to serve you, to kind of go. And that's where the LLC and trust combined really works. Because again, in order to get money from the LLC, you need to get a charging order. So, and you can frustrate them because you're not taking out a distribution, even though they have a charging order. So now you're still going, and that money isn't coming to you, it's going upstream to your holding company or to your trust, and we can set those up. So we won't go into offshore planning. We don't have enough time anyway, but there are some offshore trusts and techniques to set up in order to do some more thorough asset protection. And again, combining the formalities, right? Observing the funding, documentation, and preparation is key to this, but it can be really effective in helping you isolate your assets from your business, your personal, and from creditors in that situation, and making sure you're still set up now in the present and when you pass away to have control over that and gifting to your kids. So again, on this side is pretty much the same, but is similar. Again, it prevents liability from rolling over. We talked about the one LLC per rental or line of business, but again, a series LLC will be really good in this. And then sometimes adding another member to your single member LLC can really help bolster your charging order protection in that situation, and that would be good for you. This is how the trust shield works. Again, the trust holds ownership of the LLC. If the LLC is already, been active and in process, and you set the trust up, what we can do is an assignment of membership interest from you personally to the trust and roll that over. So now the trust, we have that. We would do a new operating agreement, set up some new documents and everything to do that. Basically, what you were doing, removing assets from your legal name, which would be protecting you from those personal lawsuits, which you would be going after. Your LLC, again, has that protection from limited liability company from creditors via the charging order. This allows indirect access through the trustee, and your spouse can be the trustee. She can make distributions to herself that you can live off of and go from there, and helps prevent some seizures and divorce, bankruptcy, and personal judgments. So some of my final takeaways is, you can't protect yourself without a plan. I would definitely say plan in advance, be ahead of the game, start to at least explore setting up some entities, setting up a trust, looking at how it's going to look for yourself and your business. Even if you're a sole proprietor, like I'm just starting out, the LLC here is $300, but it does, give you access to business line of credit, business credit card, and things like that, which can help you, protect your personal assets. Um, Again, it's not about hiding, it's about structuring, and this is what we'll be looking to do. Nothing we were trying to do would be a fraudulent, conveyance. And a fraudulent conveyance or fraudulent transaction is, hey, you sue me, I have 100,000, and I just give it to my wife. The court's going to go in and say, hey, you know what? You can't do that. We need to pull that money back and do it. And I've seen them, there's case law where a person has sold a home and they need to pull the home back because it was a fraudulent conveyance in that situation. And again, we'll be combining the tools from the trust, LLC, and insurance, and help to have a good comprehensive plan for you for asset protection. And again, timing is key. You can book a call now. Ashreen is going to put the link for my Calendly invite to jump on a call with me. We can just, go over what you have in your estate. Maybe it's just basic estate planning. Maybe some of it is asset protection or doing some other things to set things up for you properly and getting that going for you. So that'll be in the chat and you can capture it here. Some people have already booked a call, so they're ready to go and get things going. So I'm always happy to look to support and assist those who are growing in their business and their practices moving forward. So thank you so much. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to stay on the line to answer a few questions if there are any. Again, you can reach out to me individually. I think most of you somewhat know me and what's going on and everything. So thank you so much for attending. We will send the slides out with the replay to everyone who registered for the video. So if you know someone who registered, please share. It'll start to go on my YouTube channel as well as we move forward with this. And I will send a survey because I would love to get your feedback on the level of content that you heard today. Was it high, medium, low? Do you want more? Was it, a little bit too much? I'll send a survey when we send out the replay and go from there. And I want to thank everyone for joining and have a great rest of your weekend. And let's keep more of what you have and protect it. So thank you so much for joining.